Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
And I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And you can follow the show on Twitter at Total Recall Show or on Instagram at Total_Recall_Show. So today we're going to talk about
Lord of the Rings.
talk about ambition.
We're always tackling the big ones, breaking out the big guns.
Yeah, we're going to work our way backwards. We're going to start with like the big one, and then we're going to get like more and more esoteric. Before there was ever the epic film series, there was the epic book series, and I mean the book was like a mega hit. It was like colossal.
It was huge, and going back for me personally, like with the books, I when I was in elementary school, our elementary school had a copy of The Hobbit, so I read that probably in like 5th or 6th grade, and then when I was in high school, I heard that the movies were coming out, and in preparation, I read The Fellowship, and then read the other ones as like right after the movie came out. Then I read the other two. Then like late, probably around like 2001, 2002.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, the Rankin Bass animated version of The Hobbit was like just in circular. It was like on TV a lot. So like that was my intro. Like I saw that a lot, and I even like I had like a birthday party that was like Rankin Bass Hobbit themed.
Nice, that's awesome.
It was like I don't know, like I didn't choose the theme as far as I recall. I think like my dad somehow had gotten a hold of like a bunch of like posters and stuff. So like the games were like related to the
awesome.
Hobbit, and those were like the posters were given away as prizes. Bilbo meeting Smaug and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Like I would have loved to have attended that party.
I'd love to have like clearer recollection. I have like very hazy recollection. Of course, there's no like video or anything.
Yeah, like I know what you mean about that kind of stuff. Because like I know we did our Master of the Universe episode previously, but one of my early birthday parties, I had Masters of the Universe like wrapping paper.
Okay. And
I did like a Google deep dive like last year, like trying to track down that wrapping paper. So I totally get. Now I'm gonna have to jump on this these Hobbit party favorites.
Yeah, right.
I'm obsessed now.
So that was it, like for me, and then I like it didn't run as often, but I remember seeing there was like Rankin Bass kind of skipped all the way to the end. They did The Hobbit, and then they skipped the first two Lord of the Rings books, and then went straight to Return of the King and did an animated Return of the King. So they kind of did like bookends, and so it was a little like I was a little bothered by the fact that like Bilbo was like on the periphery, like he wasn't that time had sort of moved on, and he was like kind of old and close to death, and
that Hobbit in Rankin Bass, I remember that was on a lot in retrospect.
Like it kind of planted the seed, and of course like Dungeons and Dragons was huge. This was like the heyday of Dungeons and Dragons, and again like as we've talked about in previous episodes, the sort of satanic panic of the 80s. Yeah. Like I wasn't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons, but like to me I couldn't see the difference between Dungeons and Dragons and The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but like for whatever reason like Lord of the Rings was cool as far as my dad was concerned, but then Dungeons and Dragons was not. So like
you gotta watch out for that 80s satanic panic.
Yeah, the
Hobbit, devil worshipping son.
It was like The Hobbit was like a loophole, like a way that I could like get to play in that sort of like imaginative world.
See, Dad, the devil's bad.
And but yeah, like I guess, and it was kind of like that 60s generation that like my parents were part of. Lord of the Rings was like huge. It like really struck a nerve because it was kind of like a return to nature and magic and fairies and goblins and
Oh yeah, like a lot of tree worship in throughout the
Yeah, like nature kind of like very like and psychedelic and,
and smoking that the pipe weed.
Yeah, they call it Old Toby, which I'm assuming is just like tobacco, Old Toby, But yeah, like in the movies, Peter Jackson had some fun, doing some like Cheech and Chong material,
Gandalf like pulls like a big bong.
Yeah, well, pretty much, and like there's a lot of like where their eyes start to cross.
Yeah, I was wondering because like Gandalf and Bilbo were driving in like a car with like shag carpet inside.
For me, there was like a lot of time between like the books and the movie. Like it was just books and cartoons and video games and like there were some like role-playing games that were like specifically Lord of the Rings. So it was a lot of it like lived in my imagination for a really long time. And yeah, I was probably like around the same age as you were when I first like read The Hobbit, probably like 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, something like that. It's kind of like made for that age group.
Yeah, I remember Metzger had it in there, and I checked it out, and and then like in high school, it's like they're making a Lord of the Rings movie, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna rip this, and then like I remember the event of the movie, like how big, like what a touchstone, and it was humongous, and I remember I had my buddies worked at the movie theater. They were like waiting for like the opening, like to buy your tickets in advance. Yeah, there was they told me this story about like a guy that came out of the woods or whatever, like to be first in line.
An actual like hobbit or
yeah, they were saying it was like I don't know if Mowgli or somebody or like came out of the forest to come and walked up and bought the first ticket for Lord of the Rings. Like, oh, look at that. Like an actual hobbit.
Yeah, or a wizard.
A wizard came out of the woods and he got the first ticket.
I had like for me like my first experience of like people getting their tickets in advance and stuff was The Crow, when The Crow came out, and it was like goth kids. It was like we like went up to the counter to buy tickets. We figured we were early enough, and they're like sold out. And then like a crew of goth kids came up and they're like brandishing their tickets, like we were here yesterday.
Oh my gosh, like The Crow was like I was like okay, I was obsessed with The Crow. I remember in math class, Dave Roberts had like the graphic novel, and I was obsessed, kind of like at the part where like I want to see where Eric Draven died. Like where's the part where he dies to become? So I like was sitting there flipping through to find when he died, and then I love you, Mom, so much. She I would always ask her to do like costumes and stuff, and I wanted to be the Crow for Halloween.
It's a great costume,
and but I don't think I pulled it off. And she also did a Turtles costume too. She got the shell and stuff but I still feel like I can pull the Crow off one of these days. I'll have like white makeup over my
Yeah, we'll do a Crow episode.
Oh my gosh.
Coming soon, The Crow.
Stay tuned.
Did you ever have like a Lord of the Rings costume for Halloween, or was that pretty much done by the time?
Never had the Lord of the Rings costume. I did get into the Lord of the Rings Legos though.
Okay.
They I do have like around like the Hobbit movies, and I can't remember exactly when the Lord of the Rings Legos came, but I did get a couple. I thought they were some of the best like sets ever made for Lego. Really fun, and like it's great seeing like little Hobbit like minifigures and stuff.
Were the Hobbits like the normal Lego scale, and then like is Gandalf like bigger?
I can't remember. I know, you know what? I think the Hobbits were smaller.
They were like micro figures or something.
Yeah. But yeah, obsessed with the movies, and I think of my favorite of like for the I don't know, my favorite might be Fellowship for the movies.
Yeah, I mean that one is like the most kind of like a home run movie. Like it's got everything. It's got like the whole formula. It's got everything you want from like a fantasy.
Comforting.
Yeah, it's got like the whole like Dungeons and Dragons setup. Like I mean, obviously like Dungeons and Dragons is such sort of a touchstone. Like at least like for our generation when you're talking about Lord of the Rings, because like Dungeons and Dragons, almost like it feels like that came first, and then Lord of the Rings came second. But obviously, like Lord of the Rings, is like the granddaddy of this stuff, and like Dungeons and Dragons was kind of like, oh, what if you made a game out of Lord of the Rings, and then all the derivative video games. It's the same thing. It's like, and so Fellowship has that. It's like we're going on a quest, and then it's like we go to the local tavern, and we like put our team together in the tavern, and then the dungeon, like the Mines of Moria, that's the dungeon crawl where you go through the dungeon, and then you get whatever treasures you find whatever, and then you fight a big like boss monster, and then you get out.
I know, it's like it's the total package, and it's like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign come to life. It's like Frodo and Sam. It's like you go through the cornfield. Merry and Pippin have joined your party. You've met Merry and Pippin. It's like, go to the tavern. It's like Strider has joined the party.
Yeah, and then
it's awesome.
And then you have like a cool like cliffhanger ending at the end, and you're like, I'm on board. I want to see where the rest of this thing goes. I can't wait. I mean, the first one is just like boom, and you're hooked, and then the second one, it's kind of like not, it just, it sags a little bit.
Yeah, you're leading up to it, everyone's like, Helm's Deep, man, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. They. I mean, like I really appreciate, because like I was such a huge fan of like the books, that like when the movies came out. I mean, I loved the movies and still do, but I kind of like obsessed over the differences. Like, oh, why did he change this? Why did he change that? But now I understand. It's like you're making a movie. You're making 3 movies, and you're not even sure if the first one's going to succeed. Like, he's making these 3 movies concurrently. I can't even imagine.
Unbelievable. It's like they were living there. It's interesting. They like bonded. The cast like bonded. They're living in New Zealand and like, becoming this like family, and I think it shows on screen too.
They had their sort of like own sort of parallel quest, like in real life, similar journey to what they do in the movie. They
all got like tattoos. I thought I heard somewhere like matching like.
And I'm sure for like this period of their life, like that's all their life was this, and then for like the next 10 years, you're watching like one movie roll out after the other,
like. Yeah, the director's cuts are like the theatrical versions are like 3 hours, so the director's cuts are even longer too.
The second one, like of the books, the second one was actually my favorite book, because a lot of like really cool stuff that happens in the third movie is actually in the second book. Like the second book is chopped. The second book has like all the stuff with like the Ents is like much more expanded. All the stuff with like Saruman, like the whole Saruman, story kind of like is all summed up in the second one, and then you have like all the stuff with like Frodo and Sam and the spider, but Shelob. That whole thing, the whole Shelob thing is like pretty much resolved, and then like the second one kind of ends with Sam thinks Frodo's dead, and then Frodo gets like carried up into like Mordor and stuff, and then Sam realizes that Frodo's alive, and he's like cursing himself for like assuming he was dead and letting him go. So like think about all that stuff is pretty deep into the third movie. So all this great stuff is happening in the second book, and so when all that stuff was taken out, I was like, well, like no wonder this movie is kind of weak. You took out all the good stuff. But I mean, I get it now. It's like they had to like. They're like, okay, how do we make a movie out of this? Okay, we'll build up Helm's Deep, because again, like in the book, Helm's Deep is just kind of like it's just an incident. It's like, and it's not like a big deal. They're like, we're going to Helm's Deep. Great, let's go to Helm's Deep. And they like where in the movie they kind of like play up the drama of it. Like, should we go to Helm's Deep? Don't go to Helm's Deep. Maybe.
What's Helm's Deep?
Yeah, exactly. They build it up and then they make it into this like grand battle. So yeah, but I understand you're trying to make movies and you're trying to like spread these like dramatic bits like around the best you can, and then make it have like a slam bang finish. And then the third one felt like it was overstuffed. Like, it had like too much stuff going. Like great, like like I love the third, but again, like the first one is kind of like perfect balance, and then the other two, for, like one's a little too lean and the other one's a little too stuffed.
I totally get that.
Yeah, and you know, and then the ending is kind of rushed. Like you do get in the third one, you do get like the ending, but it's kind of rushed. And yet you're talking about like how long those movies are, and then they have the super extended versions. Now, I saw the movie. My dad went with me to see the third one.
Oh yeah.
And we saw it, and he just hated it. Like he hated how long it was, and he like got up out of his seat. There were all these points where he thought it was over, and he got up, and then he like let out a loud sigh when like the movie starts back up again, and it's like, and there are like maybe like 5 or 6 endings, you know, points, you know, like
he's like, well, that's where. Wait, what? And then he sits back down.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh no, Dad, we've got another hour to go. You know?
Like the credits start rolling, then they like go in reverse.
Yeah. It's so.
Give me a break.
So like. You know, you can only imagine, like, I don't think he ever saw the extended versions. But, like, having seen all, like, now, whenever I watch The Lord of the Rings, I watch the extended versions. Because, like, I want the full experience. And it is, I mean, it's a much different thing sitting in your house and being able to watch, like, over the course of a week or something, watch the whole series rather than see the whole thing in one sit. And like, a lot of the complaints I'd had where it's like, oh, whatever happened to this part from the book, it's like almost all of that stuff is in the movie. Like they and the third one really shines in the extended version because like it's got everything, and it's like the most thorough ending I've ever seen in a movie, because it, like, all the little connecting bits and pieces that they took out of the movie are there. So, like, you know, you get like the full sweep of everything, and it works much better as a movie. It's like, you know, 6 hours long or whatever.
It's like you got to dedicate the day to it.
Yeah, at least, you know, yeah. It really does become like a like an event, like you know, like the Ring of the Nibelungs, you know, because again, that's you know, that's like the inspiration for Lord of the Rings, is like the ring cycle, you know, the opera, the ring cycle, and that's how those like, they're like these epic operas where like they go and they have these like festivals that you go to where it's like days to watch like the entire like ring cycle.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so this is kind of like very true to that, you know, tradition that it came out of.
That's awesome. Great casting.
I mean, Hugo Weaving.
Oh, I know. Hugo Weaving's great, and like Ian McKellen, I think he got like Oscar nominated for Gandalf. Mm-hmm. For a lot of these actors, I feel their roles in The Lord of the Rings have become their like Elijah Wood. It's got to be his iconic.
Yeah, I mean these are like huge movies that came out in kind of like a pivotal time for like you know, a lot of people, and yet you're just the number of hours that you're spending with these characters. Like, this is like before the you know, before Netflix and before like the binge kind of like TV. You know, so this was like, yeah, you're just you know, you're going on this journey with them. Before
The Lord of the Rings, Elijah Wood, his iconic role for me was the good son with Macaulay Culkin. Okay,
yeah, yeah, Elijah Wood, like, you know, one of these, you know, child actors who kind of, you know, finds a way to, like, you know, redefine himself as, you know, as in like, an adult role.
Great supporting actors from they got Liv Tyler in there, and Kate Blanchett. They're all everyone. It's like they just keep popping up. I'm like, this is great. No, that person's great. No, that person's great.
Sean Astin.
Oh my gosh,
you know,
Sean Astin.
You know, kind of holds the whole thing together.
Oh, love Sean Astin.
Yeah, I only recently learned that he was John Astin's son. He was Gomez Adams' son. So I'm like trying to looking at him, trying to see like, okay, where's the Gomez Adams? Because like he's kind of like such like kind of like a weird presence, and then Sean Astin is like so like normal. It's kind of like, okay, where's the...
His mom is an actor too.
Okay,
I can't remember her name.
She wasn't Morticia. Yeah,
I wish I could look this up.
Yeah, we'll add it in the show notes. Yeah, and then Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn. You know, the hero, and it's like, you know, he was in like Carlito's Way, and like he's like, he had been around a really long time. So I mean, he was probably like 50 years old or something, playing like the heroic lead. You know?
Looks great, great look. I remember him from he was Roy Nord in the Stallone movie Daylight. He's like a overconfident mountain climber who dies in a tunnel.
Yeah, I know him as Lali from Carlito's Way. Yeah,
and he was in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, he kind of he's one of those like sort of like character actors who finally got to be like front and center, and then it makes his whole back catalog kind of come alive. You start watching the movie, and he's like just here in the corner, and it's like, oh, there he is. Oh, he's over there. It is kind of like, okay, how old is he? Because he seems like he's pretty much the same age then, but it's like that's like 20 years before Lord of the Rings.
I have to rewatch Carlito's Way. Viggo Mortensen back catalog.
Yeah,
redo.
Yeah, we'll do a Viggo Mortensen episode. Yeah, he was in like a David Lynch movie too.
Okay.
But yeah, like, I mean, the movie was just like a phenomenon. It was one of those movies where like you'd get a group of people together to go see it, you know?
Yeah, I'm still amazed that they filmed them all together. Mm-hmm. Like, that's impressive.
Yeah, like we were talking about like the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, how they filmed like part 1 and then like 75% of part 2 back to back, and it just seems so exhausting, like all those sets, and then like Lord of the Rings is that, you know,
great location.
Yeah, like if you watch the Flight of the Conchords, like, you know, they're from New Zealand, and like all that stuff's filmed in New Zealand, and like that's what New Zealand really looks like. Like it really looks like, you know, Middle Earth, and it's not like these locations were kind of like created for the movie or something. Like Tolkien did paintings and drawings of like, you know, here's what Helm's Deep looks like, here's what the Fangorn Forest looks like, and it's like they're like, oh yeah, we got that, you know, we got a thing that looks like that.
Yeah, like amazing, and probably like a boom to the New Zealand tours.
Yeah, that was the essence of like Flight of the Conchords, was like, this was like the New Zealand Chamber of Commerce. This was like everything was like Lord of the Rings related, and just like the time it came out, like if you remember, it was kind of like this would like there'd be like a Lord of the Rings movie, and then there'd be like a Harry Potter movie.
Oh yeah.
You know, and then I'm trying to remember, like, were they still making Star Wars prequels at that point too?
They had to.
Yeah, so it was like, yeah, there were, you know, and then like the James Bond series was getting fired up, and so it was like, you know, a lot of these interesting like you know, serial, you know, things going on.
There was never a drought for like an interesting flick. It's like, oh, you don't want to see Attack of the Clones? Like, then we got Two Towers for you.
Going back to the books, like you can really get lost in that like Lord of the Rings mythology, and like before the movies, I really did. Like I started reading Lord of the Rings when I was in high school, and I started with Return of the King, and it's you know, kind of funny because like, you know, that's like the third one, but it was just kind of like, it's like, oh, there's these 3 books. This one looks interesting. Let me read this. Like I didn't think of it as, you know, and like Tolkien, when he designed it, like one of his intents was he wanted to make just a really long story. Like that, you know, that was really appealing to him, this idea of making a really long story. And so he wanted it to be published as like one, but here's the Lord of the Rings, you know, but then, you know, publishers were like, can't do it, like, you got to break it up. Yeah, break it up in 3. So that was like a concession. But so then, yeah, it's like these, you know, 3 books, like, oh, you know, which flavor of ice cream do you want or something.
And it was interesting, like, I think like after the movies came out, like the books and like the DVD packaging on like the first release, they like assigned like the Fellowship is green themed, then like the like a maroon kind of for like the Two Towers, and blue for the third one. Yeah. Tolkien's like, Fellowship shall be green. It's like all related material.
It is funny because like for you know, just for forever, you know, you're used to seeing these books in like a bookstore or the library with like those like Tolkien drawings or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're seeing like, yeah, Viggo Mortensen's photo.
Christopher Lee.
Yeah, Christopher Lee. Like, how great's Christopher? And he's like simultaneously doing that and with Count Dooku. Yeah.
What a time for Chris Lee. That's awesome. And it's so funny, like seeing the yeah, you're right, seeing a book, you know, going from those nice drawings, and then seeing like you're like, oh, it's Viggo Mortensen forever emblazoned on there.
Yeah, that is like a really interesting thing that happens, because like I'll read a book, and then I'll have like, you know, images of what all the characters look like, and like they just, you know, in my head they just kind of look like the characters, and then when like a movie comes out, all of a sudden you kind of like realize who you were imagining, like the person you were imagining becomes very clear, because they get, as they're getting pushed out of your mind by, you know, the actor, it is kind of like, oh, that's who I was, you know, modeling that character after.
Like Orlando Bloom, I think, besides like I know him from the Lord of the Rings movies, and then the I think he's in like 5 like Pirates of the Caribbean movies,
Yeah.
and then Elizabethtown with like Cameron Crowe's film. I don't know him for much else beyond those titles.
Yeah, and he gets to have like the great role, because like the elves, like in Lord of the Rings and in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, like the elves, it's almost like unfair. Like they have all the advantages. They get to live a long time. They have like tremendous. There's like no disadvantage to being an elf. They have
symmetrical face, high cheekbones.
Yeah, like you know, why would you want to be any other character than? And then in the movie, yeah, he's like a superhero. He's like just doing backflips and bouncing off of things, and you know, like it's like a cherry role. You know.
Oh.
You get, and then he gets to be in the Hobbit too. Like I mean, you know, he's you know, he gets to stick around for everything. Where like you know Gimli, you know, like you know, doesn't live as long as, and like Gimli wasn't, you know, he wasn't born yet, or he was like a baby when the Hobbit was going on. So he doesn't get, the actor gets to be in it. He plays like his own father.
John Rhys Davies.
Yeah, John Rhys Davies. He was amazing. Like he got to be like a real like he's a lot of people's favorite. You know, in the Lord of the Rings.
He's so good.
He's like, you know, he's funny. You know, he's relatable. You know.
Yeah, he's a great character in the Indiana Jones movies too.
Yes.
Sala.
Oh, terrific character. Yeah, and yeah, in the third Indiana Jones movie, when he comes back, it's like, oh, you know, you're back. Like, you know, welcome back.
Welcome back. The I don't know. There has to be like a running gag or running joke about like Sean Bean dying in like one of his movies or something. Like he's like. Does he make it out alive? Of like, I know he's in Ronin. I think he lives through that. Maybe I can't remember, but yeah, he's always getting killed.
Yeah, and he played Boromir, right?
Yeah,
he played Boromir, and another great role. Like he's like, you know, like that. His I mean, in the book, he like you know, like every character gets like more than their share of screen time in the book. You know, in the book, you get like a thorough, you know, understanding of like, you know, the beginning, middle, and end of all of these characters' lives in the book. Like you know, and he definitely gets his due. But he is like a really, like, that archetype is very interesting. It's like the Judas Iscariot archetype or whatever, and yeah, he's like. You know, he's like the hero. He's like the big burly hero, but then he has like his fatal flaw.
Yeah.
And then he kind of like, you know, recants at the, you know, kind of like Lando in you know, but then, you know, is, you know, sort of, you know, tragically struck down. But he has like his great like last stand where he's just
I love that. And everyone's killing it in this movie, and Sean Bean, great line deliveries too, and he's like, give them a moment, for pity's sake.
Yeah, there's that whole like middle of the movie where they go to like, you know, Rivendell and stuff, and it's like, you know, and everybody's kind of gathered around, and there's the, you know, the council, like, you know, people come from far and wide and stuff, and then there's all the arguing, and you see that like, oh, you know, like the ring is going to cause all this, you know, all this strife, and like, you know, the world's going to die if like, you know, everybody doesn't sort of come together for this.
He said of the Fellowship, they're like, I thought it was weird. They're like, you are the group that gathers around the ring. It's like, what?
That first movie, like, you think about it, it's like, it's got everything, and then it's also like scary, like. The ring wraiths on their horses are like real, you know, real scary, and they have that scene that's kind of like, you know, like there's a scene like it in Jurassic Park. Like there's the scene where it's like the bad guys, they're like sniffing, like they're and like all the hobbits are hidden below, and like it's like they're gonna find us, like we're done, and then you know, somebody like throws a rock or whatever, and then they get distracted and go, and like so scary, and then when they show up in the other movies. they're no longer on horseback. Like all their horses got washed away, and so now they're like riding dragons and stuff. And they're just not as scared. Like because the dragon and stuff, it's like more. It's like CGI, and it's more where like a horse is kind of like more. It's closer. It's more palpable.
You're spot on. Because I was thinking about the special effects in the I was watching the Fellowship. I'm like, they still hold up. They didn't. There's a lot of CGI effects, and I think there's other kinds of effects in there too. But like with the ring race, practical effects, like a guy in like a black flowing cloak on a real horse, like gets me every time.
The first one was like the one that was sort of closest to like Peter Jackson's previous movies, like when he was sort of like a horror and like sort of like schlock direct, kind of like a Sam Raimi sort of direct. It was and again that was another like parallel like the Spider-Man series was coming out around the same time too. Yeah, and you had like Norman Osborn talking to himself in the mirror, and then you had Gollum. Talking to himself in like his reflection in the pool and stuff. Yeah, like those
awesome horror directors broke big around the same time.
Yeah, and you'd see some of the kind of like, low cost but highly effective effects in Peter Jackson. In Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and then as the series went on, it's like the CGI got better. And time got short, it was like, deadlines got crunchier and,
He's like, I've got all the time in the world. He's like, take 7.
Mm-hmm. But we're going to do all in-camera effects.
Reset on the squibs or whatever. Then he's like, Peter, the movie's due in 2 weeks.
Like they had like artificial intelligence and stuff where like AI had gotten really good where you could have like, these little digital armies, and then you wouldn't have to like say, okay, frame, move this guy over there, move that. They just have their AI that would like make them go like where they're supposed to go and do and they'd make little like choices of their own. And I remember hearing that there were some quirks to it that like at first the AI was too good because what they would end up doing is they would just run away from the battle. Like they'd start and they'd like sense danger or whatever and just like run away. And so they had to like adjust the AI so that they would be a little more reckless.
I put my artificial intelligence into this.
Yeah. They're all like banging their knees together and like biting their nails.
The one that held up filming because I'm like, Peter, count on me. I'm downloading my artificial intelligence into this. They're all like,
humana.
There's an orc over there.
And those like dragons that they rode, like reading the books, the way they were described in the books, it sounded like they were describing pterodactyls. So it was kind of like, you'd like that you'd see like a more credible kind of like dinosaur, like a pterodactyl or something. And I couldn't wait to see that. And then to see this sort of like very, like kind of like fantasy art 101 kind of like dragons that they're riding on. It's kind of like, this, like, cause even a pterodactyl would be more relatable than just this very like, fanciful dragon.
Yeah. And Peter Jackson, like going back with his like horror roots, kind of like the angles and like the way he shoots
some Dutch angles
in there, and like Saruman versus Gandalf in the tower in Fellowship, like
it was like an exorcism kind of scene, and there'd be like a lot of the kind of like unsettling kind of like fast forwards and stuff, or like the you probably know the name for it, where it's like you pull focus, like you
dolly zoom?
A dolly zoom. Yeah, you zoom in and then like zoom out on the lens at the same time, so it's like the person separates.
Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you like separate from the background. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff. Like like the language of horror, like for all the sort of like thrills and stuff in the book, in the Lord of the Rings book, it is kind of like J.R.R. Tolkien is this like very polite, mild-mannered guy. And it is like a very polite, mild-mannered story. Everybody speaks very nicely and kind of, it moves at like this leisurely pace. But it's like, okay, we're making a movie now. So you gotta like kind of amp up the, the horror and
I do like that aspect of like the first one too. Like it's like it's like relaxing.
Yeah. Like it's a lot of walking. Like it's the rhythm of walking as opposed to like the rhythm of like speeding in your car or like I think that was like part of the appeal of the books and probably the movies too, was this idea of like, oh, we're in this like, you know, crazy modern age, and wouldn't it be nice to be, you know, back in like an era where you could, you know, hear the breeze and see the grass sway,
just relax.
You got to have like a lot of anticipation, like when you have like a long series, and especially like a long series of movies where you've read the books and you're like, oh, I can't wait to see this, I can't wait to see that. And yeah, there was kind of like the Witch King. He's kind of like this this like, you know, like again, like another boss, you know, boss battle, but and like, so yeah, he would ride like a pterodactyl, and he was like, you know, they had to like fight him and stuff, and then like you know, in the movie they make him like implode, like, you know, which is another one of like Peter Jackson's like horror things of like having, you know, a character like implode, and
I love
you know,
it.
the Return of the King movie did like, it became my favorite like after the extended versions of it's like the closest thing to like a Ray Harryhausen movie that, you know, came out of, you know, this sort of like modern age. Like it is pure like just insanity. It's like there's giants and there's like, you know, these weird elephants, I call them olifants, you know, with spikes. There's just like, you know, just this like big crazy monster movie of just like all these monsters colliding and stuff.
I love it. The practical effects on like the orcs and the Uruk-hai, like amazing. And then I love in the Fellowship too when he's Boromir, I think, looks out the door and he's like, they've got a cave troll, and you don't see it for like, I'm like, oh god, close the door.
Yeah, you see like the effect of it before you, like, yeah, you see the door kind of like shake and you know, even with like when the orcs shut, you know, you see like, you know, spears kind of poke through like holes in the gate, and so yeah, great like suspense, just so much fun. Yeah,
it's so fun. I'm like, oh god, I'm like, what is this gonna look like?
And then they you know, followed it up, you know, years later with like the Hobbit movies, and it was kind of like, you know, Lord of the Rings nostalgia. It's like, oh yeah, remember Lord of the Rings? It's, you know, let's revisit that world.
I know you're a Denny's fan too, just like me.
Right.
And the one of the great Hobbit related promotions is the Denny's Hobbit menu. It was amazing. They had like the Hobbit Slam.
You know, what I felt was like a missed opportunity with like the Denny's Hobbit menu was that they didn't, like, I always wanted to try that lembas bread that they ate in the movies, and it's like, you know, why didn't they have some version of that? Like, it looks like a scone or something. It looks like really good.
There was like Gandalf sausage or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, like it's you know, food and like fantasy movies and stuff. It's kind of like a weird pair. And yeah, I remember like somebody wrote like a review of the Denny's Hobbit menu.
I need to read this.
It was like, the title of it was An Unexpected Journey to the Bathroom. And it's like, even if their Hobbit menu was like the most delicious thing ever, and it was just phenomenal, like, you can't resist coming up with that title, you know, for your review of it.
There's like the Hobbit Slam. That sounds like a move that like a pro wrestler delivers to like Bilbo. It's like, just give me the Hobbit Slam.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't following wrestling at the time. Like, when the Hobbit movies were coming out, or when the Lord of the Rings movie were they were like kind of like Lord of the Rings style, like storylines working their way into wrestling. We'll have to do some research and see if there's like see like the ripple effects of like, you know, the Lord of the Rings in like the wider culture, because like wrestling is like, it's such a sponge. Like wrestling is like, it doesn't put on airs or anything. It's like, it'll grab from wherever, like whatever's in the zeitgeist, they're gonna grab. Like, it's kind of pure in that way.
I remember, oh my god, it's Rey Mysterio.
Okay.
Rey Mysterio Jr. and he was dressed. My buddy Dan showed me. It was a 5-star match, and it was like a Phantom promotion for the Phantom movie. So
okay, yes.
Rey was dressed up like a Phantom.
Okay, yeah, like, because I got there's like, you know, like a ring match or something where like, you know, everybody has to fight over a ring.
Instead of a coal miner's glove match, it's a or a bunkhouse.
Yeah, there's like a ring hanging from a hook, and all these fantasy themed, you know, wrestlers have to, whoever grabs it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tables, ladders, Hobbit match. I might have to recreate and try to do like a homebrew recipe for the Denny's Hobbit menu.
Yeah, and the Lembas, I'm sure some like Tolkien super fan has come up with found like the authentic lembas bread recipe or like Tolkien's intent. He had like a lot of intents for this book, and one of them was he wanted to make a really long story. Another one was like he was a linguist, and he wanted to create like his own language, and so he created like his own language, and he wanted to create like a mythology to go with that language and a history. And he also he felt like a lot of like the history of England was sort of lost. It was sort of lost after the Roman Empire leaves, and then kind of like Christianity comes in. They destroyed a lot of like the records and a lot of the statuary and architecture. Like they destroyed a lot of like the sort of history of England up to that point. So it's kind of like lost. There's this like big gap in like our knowledge of like what was going on in England. So partially like Lord of the Rings was a way to sort of like just with his imagination kind of recreate it, create what he awesome. Might have thought, and so it was Middle Earth. Because I always wondered like what you'd hear about Middle Earth, and I wondered what it was like. Okay, is it like just does Middle Earth like exist like in the middle of Earth? Like is it one of those like things where it's like you go underground and then you come out and then there's like a little sun inside the middle, and like like a land before time kind of like, is it that or whatever? What is Middle Earth? But it was it was this like middle period, the Middle Ages. It was it was just it was Middle Earth was just this sort of like a geography and an era. It was basically England. He was creating like a version of England that occupies this like
certain
time period that is sort of lost. The Hobbits and stuff, like they'd be like like Ireland or whatever, and and when you think like because these like maps that he would draw feel like, okay, this is like the entire world, but it's like you're just looking at the island of England, and then like all the evil lands are everything else. It's like all the good guys are in England, and then all the bad guys are once you step into like France or Spain or Germany or whatever.
I'm like the mountains of Mordor are coming out of Paris.
And like the Lord of the Rings, like that whole like Tolkien Middle Earth like world, like he basically like he wasn't like he was prolific in that he had created this big thing, but it's not like he wasn't he doesn't have like, oh, I don't just have Lord of the Rings, I also have this, and I have that. Like he really like spent his whole life polishing and developing this interconnected mythology, and he did it like so thoroughly. And I'd read these books a bunch of times prior to the movies coming out, and then I'd like listen to the book on CD, and then I'd listen to like the BBC dramatizations. Like I was just like really like just so into it, because it is like this world you can kind of get lost in. And then when you start reading the appendices and things, you get like any question you have about any of these characters gets answered. And then like you read the book, and then it has like a happy ending, and then Samwise Gamgee, he gets married to Rosie, and then they have kids. Now, if you go into like the appendices, you can find out what happens to Sam's kids, and then what happens to Sam's kids' kids, and like there's so many generations, and you see, and you can find out what happens with Aragorn. So yeah, we've been talking about Lord of the Rings for, I don't know, at least like 40 minutes now, and it's like I don't feel like we're even close to like having covered the whole thing. It's just like such a huge subject, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did a great job. We were scratching the surface, basically.
Yeah, and kind of like touching like a little bit of everything, where it's like, okay, book, movie,
Denny's Hobbit menu.
The Hobbit menu at Denny's. I don't think I've ever played like a satisfying like official Lord of the Rings game. You know, like all the good Lord of the Rings games I've played have been like, you know, unofficial. You know, like I mean that whole genre of like the rogue like game. You know, that's Lord of the Rings. Like I think the earliest versions of Rogue were called Moria. You know, where you're like working your, you know, and they'd be the dungeons that you'd be working your way through would be like in ASCII code, so it would be like made up of like minus signs and plus signs, and you'd work your way through, and they'd be these sort of like randomly generated dungeons. But the idea is that you were like working your way through the mines of Moria, and you'd be fighting so like awesome. Orcs and whatnot. So like I loved those games, like especially like the old days of computers, and you know, and you'd like. You know, you'd go into a room and then suddenly a bunch of like number 8s, which would be like the orcs, the orc army. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of number 8s, and it's like, oh no, I'm toast.
What was that magazine? The is it
Blip
magazine?
Yeah. You know, this was like, you know, oh man, this is the real stuff. But yeah, I mean, you know, so I mean, we kind of touched on everything. Maybe we'll come back and revisit. Maybe this will be like a placeholder for like a further discussion of that Tolkien verse.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. So you've been watching the Lord of the Rings special extended edition of Total Recall. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
And I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And we have a show Twitter at Total Recall Show. And we have a show Instagram that's at Total_Recall_show. And we'll see you next time.
Fly, you fools!